I would like to call to order this meeting of the Groton Select Board for the 29th of July, 2019. Our agenda does not look terribly different than it usually does. We have announcements and an agenda review followed by public comment. After that, we'll have the town manager's report. I believe there will be taking things slightly out of order. So we will be ratifying appointments to the police department, the Williams Barn Committee, the Old Burying Ground Committee. We will then have presentation and discussion around the financial software for the town. We will review and potentially approve bond anticipation notes that include the library roof project, the DPW building project, and the new fire engine. We will then review and consider approving the charge for the major initiative planning committee. We will review town council's proposal on a change to the bylaw that has been discussed previously to promote reusable checkout bags and ban single-use plastic checkout bags. And we will discuss and consider appointing Sally Hensley to the Board of Registrars. We then, under other business, will consider a request to the Board of Health to propose a restriction to prohibit food establishments from using polystyrene containers. We will go through our typical ongoing issues list, and then we have a regular set of minutes from the 15th of July to discuss and potentially approve.
One change to the agenda as well.
Yep.
Under other business, I'll give a town hall innovation update.
Perfect. Do you want to just add that to the
Yeah, I'm going to add that to the ongoing issues
issues
Yep.
list, and then, so announcements. All right, I have one that the school committee has made us aware that they have a vacancy. A member who was recently elected will be moving to New Jersey, so there's an opening there. We will be meeting with the school committee, the Groton members, later this month to appoint someone to a one-year position to fill that until the next round of elections. Any other announcements?
It's on the agenda for August 26th.
Okay. Public comments? Questions? My goodness.
Allison?
Yeah.
Could I just make a comment myself at this
Absolutely.
point? I just wanted to remind the public that we do have this public comment period at the very beginning of every meeting and make people aware what it is for. We really, as a board, we are interested in what the public has to say, and we're interested in hearing feedback. Obviously, we love to hear good feedback, and we are very interested in hearing not so good feedback. We'd rather hear it directly so we can respond to it. But anything that you are thinking of, any citizen who has something they'd like to say to our board is welcome to come and use this public comment period right at the beginning of the meeting to say anything they'd like to us. So I just wanted to make people aware of what this is for.
One thing too.
Go ahead, Josh.
I've received a couple phone calls and a couple emails this past week concerning the posting of the packet that we review ourselves. And the select board members get a tremendous amount of background information about the issues that we're going to be dealing with. And you know, it never really occurred to me that, you know, while I get to review it, members of the public see the agenda and they don't see the backup information associated with it. And some people had some concerns about the major initiative planning, and they had wanted to see the draft before we took a position on it tonight, if we were going to adopt it or not. And that just got me thinking, you know, sometimes you don't see the forest through the trees, and obviously we should consider putting that whole packet online. So maybe we want to discuss that at some point in the very near future. We have discussed it in the past.
Mm-hmm. Mark, can we add that to an agenda?
Can I actually add on to that? I actually had a related question because I went looking for something that I know we discussed at a previous meeting maybe a year ago. But I couldn't find, and it made me realize, does the backup material ever get put on the website? Or is it just your report that goes on the website?
Just the town
Mark?
manager's report.
So that backup material that we discussed, if we ourselves do not print it out, we don't have a record?
It's attached to the minutes that get, right? Don't you attach the backup information to the minutes?
If it's asked that it be attached, but you can always access previous stuff in your Google Drive. That
Yeah,
stuff
right,
doesn't
right,
go away.
members can, but
Correct.
again, the public, part of the reason I went looking was somebody asked me if something was available, and I said, I'm sure it is, because we discussed it, and then I realized I couldn't find it any place that the public would be able to find it. So I think it's related to that same issue, and we ought to think about that more.
All right. Any other comments? All right. Mark, you want to run us through your report?
Yep, we're going to jump ahead to item number 4 tonight. Frank Manstrangelo and Steve Tully are here. They're with Chief Luth right now. I've appointed them as reserve police officers, and I would ask the board to consider ratifying those appointments this evening. Mike, do you want to outline the process you go through so the board understands the appointment process when we hire a
Hiring
reserve?
process for reserve
Hey,
officers in
Mike,
town.
you should pull that mic over closer.
Nice booming
Sorry.
voice. The selection process for the part-time or reserve officers mirrors that of our full-time process. Go through a battery of interviews. Usually we start off with advertising the position, receiving resumes and applications from interested parties. We narrow it down to the most qualified. And for someone to even apply, they have to have the reserve academy completed, which they do on their own time at their own cost and expense. And from there, 2 panels within the police department review and then interview the personnel, and basically funnels it down to myself, and that's what's forwarded to town manager.
And a background investigation is done.
Full
and the
background.
like. So this is our farm team. As the board knows, we've appointed some of our officers to permanent positions from the reserve piece. So when we bring somebody on a reserve, it is with the intent that maybe someday they can serve as full-time officers. So these 2 gentlemen come very highly recommended from the chief. It was my pleasure appointing them, and I'd ask the board to ratify their appointment this evening.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I move that we appoint Frank.
Ratify the appointment.
I'm sorry, ratify the appointment, ratify the town manager's appointment of Frank Mastrangelo and Stephen Tully as reserve police officers.
Second that.
All right. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye. Very good.
And while we're, thank you guys. Congratulations. Welcome
Congratulations.
aboard. Congratulations. You have Tully.
Congratulations.
You have 50-50 shot there, John.
Excellent,
Right?
thank you.
And you can say that to the second one too, then.
So in addition to those appointments, I've made a couple of others I'd ask the board to consider ratifying. Annually, we appoint police departments in their entirety as special police officers. It makes it a lot easier for us when we bring in a special from the department. So I've appointed the police officers from Pepperell, Townsend, Dunstable, Tingsboro, Westford, Ayr, Shirley, Littleton, Chelmsford, and Lunenburg as special police officers with a term ending June 30, 2020. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments this evening.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
I have a
John?
question.
Yes.
I assume we're only deputizing, if you will, the full-time police
Correct.
officers in those towns,
Correct.
not reserves.
No, just
Auxiliaries.
full-time police officers.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Becky.
So, could you just explain a little bit more what this is all about?
Well, what happens is when a police detail comes up and we don't have an officer within our department to fill that detail, we reach out to surrounding towns. They supply a police officer, and technically, I need to appoint them in order for them to serve as a special police officer. And it got very, about, was it maybe 5 years ago, Patricia? 5 or 6 years ago, we said instead of having to come in every week at a meeting with the name of a
Right.
police officer, just appoint the entire departments, so when they come in, they're set and ready to go. This was just an it's more administrative than anything else.
But it
Didn't-
also relates to mutual aid. Because those officers from other towns who may come to Groton are not, unless we do this, are not deputized
Well, I think under our mutual aid
in
agreement,
Groton. Or maybe it's built into the mutual aid agreement.
it is built into mutual aid. This is strictly because they're working details.
Okay.
But there was something that we dealt with from the town of Pepperell, and they wanted a legal, they were seeking some legal thing.
They were trying to change the intermunicipal agreement for the mutual aid agreements. I don't know where that stands right now because I haven't brought it forward to the
Okay,
board.
but that's totally
You were just
separate.
allowing town council to review the agreement.
Okay. And
Different issue.
This is totally separate. Okay, thank
Correct.
you for the
So the
clarification.
moral of the story is the devil's in the detail.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I've also appointed Lori Brackett to the Williams Bond Committee and Don Black to the Old Burying Ground Committee with a term to expire June 3rd, 2020. I'd ask the board to consider ratifying those appointments tonight as well.
Someone like to make that motion?
I move we ratify the town manager's appointments of Lori Brackett to the Williams Barn Committee and Don Black to the Old Burying Ground Committee.
Second that.
Very good. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to go back up now to item number 1 on the town manager's report. I've asked Mike Chasen and some of our department heads, Hannah Mola, Mike Hartnett, is it? Patricia Dufresne, Melissa Doig, and Tom Orcutt. They're a committee of people that we put together to review the town's financial software packages in the various financial offices and to come up with a recommendation to the board. We've been working on this for about a year. John Geiger has been the board's liaison to us. And so Mike gave you a memorandum in the packet that outlined the process, but he's here tonight and he has a small PowerPoint presentation to give to you with our recommendation, and then the employees are here to answer questions that you have. So Mike, if you want to come up to the table. Do you need the keyboard too? Yeah. Take everything.
Mike without a
Let me
keyboard?
tell- I know.
He sleeps with it.
Hello, everyone. I have a quick little presentation, mostly for anyone in the public who obviously wasn't privy to the little memo that was in the packet there. We started this project a while back, and it was kind of the result of a few things. One, we ourselves recognized a few deficiencies in our software that we wanted to see what other options were out there for us to look at. And it was also an item found in the municipal audit. They recommended us to look at doing an ERP suite.
And sorry to interrupt, it is one of the goals of the select board this year was to do this review as well. Go on, Mike.
And so with that, sometimes our department workflows, they feel a little isolated. What happens from one department doesn't really reflect in others. So if someone calls looking to find out if they owe tax money, well, they also have to call up the water department to find out if they owe a water bill. Our departments don't necessarily have access to each other's systems, and some of that's because of licensing costs, dealing with training for a system that they're not used to. And so it was good to look at that to see what we could do. And one of the other big things we had is we're kind of one of our peers that don't use one of these big packages. So what is an ERP system? Enterprise Resource Planning System. It's just, like I was saying, an application that helps manage business processes and workflows. Basically, picture combining all your things like anything you might do in QuickBooks and other reporting features all into one system. And it's usually heavily driven by the finance department of an organization. They're usually the kind of gatekeepers of what goes where in them. A few pros to outline. Data entered by one department is accessible by others now. It will streamline processes because of that. You don't necessarily have to enter the same data in two different systems. It's easier training people on one system as opposed to a multitude of other ones. It's one home for all the data, and it's really helpful if we ever had a vacancy to fill it with someone who has been working for another municipality using the same software we have. There are cons to it as well. It's usually very expensive. That's kind of usually the number one deterrent. Once you go with it, you'll find that some people don't like what that software offers, and they're going to say like, all right, maybe that's great at managing everything, doing it okay, but I really want an assessor database that's the best. And you sometimes run into that problem with an ERP system where individual departments will start looking elsewhere because they're not satisfied with the job that whole system is doing for their needs. It's very hard to leave once you get in it. Once you pay all this money, you have all your data, it's kind of hard to migrate out and leave once you have that capital investment. And lastly, everyone needs to keep using it, otherwise it becomes pretty useless. Once departments start leaving it, it kind of stops all the benefits that you get from the system. So we had a bunch of departments take place in this. We did everything from accounting, tax treasurer, we invited water and sewer, HR assessors. We talked to electric light to see if they wanted part of this, but they were pretty adamant that they were happy with what they had and didn't want to come into this ecosystem. Real quick, I don't think it's mentioned here, but the assessor's office They love their vendor that they currently have for theirs, and it kind of seemed like the assessing part was kind of a weaker component of some of these solutions, so we very quickly removed them from the equation as they didn't want to leave. They felt very happy with their vendor, and even the people that said it was quite common for people to not use them for assessing. So who do we talk? Yes, John?
And I think it's important to point out that with the assessor software, it was compatible.
Yes, exactly. So
With
our
every
assessing
package that
database
you
would
looked
still
at.
have a data bridge, much like it does with our current systems. That's pretty much the core
We
thing
just
that
have had to integrate it,
exactly. So it's still
which is
be
different
part
than
of it.
an island out there with only
Right.
water around it.
Right, and that was one of the big systems that they did, all the systems we looked at integrate with our assessor package because it was so common that would happen. So who we talked to the Vadar Systems out of Acton and Tyler Technologies. They're a much bigger person that we'll get into a little later here. And those two companies, they estimated that between the two of them, they have between 75 and 85% of all towns and cities in the state. So those are the kind of two big dogs, and then there's a lot of small individual players that, such as the ones that we use. We also brought in our existing payroll vendor and brought in our existing financial software vendor, Avila, to tell us what they could do for us. So Munis, real quick, this was by far I thought was the slickest looking software. They sent out representatives from across the country to come to us that day, real high end, totally top tier. It was very common in the state. On the IT side, we've talked to a bunch of towns that use it. They all love it, but it also was kind of expensive. Vadar Systems, much smaller company, had a much kind of smaller feel. All their customers had rave reviews about them. Munis customers, we felt like there was kind of a mix of opinions where people were it was kind of a disjoint level of satisfaction knowing they paid so much for this top tier system. They were a little unhappy with what they got, whereas this system was much more affordable. Most of their customers are in Massachusetts, and everyone seemed really happy with them. On the IT side of this one, we were really concerned because we did not like their database technology they used, and so that kind of made us not so thrilled with that aspect of it. Just to talk pricing on this, you have a question? Oh, I thought you were raising.
We'll get to that. Sorry, thank you.
Just to touch on costs real quick, there are some numbers, but basically Munis was estimating at about a $365,000 go live cost with annual maintenance of $40,000 a year thereafter. They did have a cloud hosted option that would tack on about 50 grand a year, which we told them we kind of ruled out that option right away for that. In Vadar here, they were significantly less, where if you look at this, they were about a $100,000 go live cost. They thought their implementation timeline was in the 6 to 9 month range, where Munis was 18 to 24, I think, range. Vadar did not include a lot of data migration in theirs. We weren't too thrilled with that, but we were kind of willing to work with it. And they did offer us a pretty attractive 0% financing offer for their rate at about $40,000 a year for the first 6 years to pay this off. So after we brought in these two people, we kind of really were talking, let's go. We visited a few sites of other customers, got opinions, heard what they liked, heard what they didn't like, and we kind of still were looking at the numbers and thinking, this is a lot of money. We know the town's got a lot of things going on right now. We wouldn't be doing justice if we didn't kind of go just talk to what we're currently using and find out what those options are. So we brought in our payroll vendor. We looked at some other solutions they had for cloud-based stuff, and we recognized that we had some deficiencies if what we wanted the software to do for us. The reporting was kind of weak. We're still doing a lot of paper timesheets. These are things we didn't like the process involved. And so we had their reps come out, spend the day with us. They walked us through a whole bunch of things, really enlightened us to some aspects of the software we didn't know we had the capability for. And so with that, our payroll department has been really invigorated with what we can now do with the software, better reporting. They gave us some time and attendance import options, but we have other meetings scheduled for this month trying to look at the time and attendance options that they could provide. That would be an additional cost that we don't have the numbers for, but we estimate probably around $5,000 to $6,000 extra a year if we want to roll those out. We're slightly hesitant on that just because even when we talk to other towns who were using time and attendance products to automate their payroll more, they still were kind of like skipping one little step, adding more between their police and fire departments because those are such complex payrolls to enter automatically. So we're excited to see what they can offer on that. But ultimately, we were happy with the direction that Harper's Payroll, who our vendor is, had us going in here. We also brought in our existing financial software vendor. It's a company called Abila with a product called MIP. We had originally thought they were a very small company, and we didn't really have too many peers that we knew using them. We really didn't have anyone that we knew was using them. However, once we brought them in, turns out they're a pretty large company, just not so big in the municipal space. They have over 5,000 customers in the US alone. They let us know Town of Hull is using them, so that's great that we have a peer who's kind of similar to us in our demographics that we can
One of our peer communities.
that we can talk to, and we kind of showed them all the things we got excited about when we looked at these other more expensive demos and said, well, what can you do for us? And they were kind of laughing like, oh, well, did you look at this module that you guys didn't buy, I think 8 years, was it 8 years? 2003. In 2003, and we said, well, what are those? So they outlined a whole bunch of different modules that could help match similar capabilities that some of the other systems had. And so we were really excited to look at those, and those kind of pricings up there. Just on the packet I gave you guys, I estimated water and sewer expenses about $5,000 a year. It's closer to 8, just as a small correction there. But those are the expenses we're kind of looking at right now, what we spend on some of these software packages. On the right-hand side is kind of what we're looking at trying to fit in somewhere this year, about $9,500 of expenses, which would increase, we'd look to increase Trish's budget probably about $2,700 to cover the additional annual maintenance on that. Obviously, that number was a lot less than these other ones, and we thought we were going to get a lot of bang for our buck there compared to going those. So that's the direction we as a team kind of decided. Everyone looked at what they had, what they didn't like. A lot of people did like what they had. And we talked about, not having these systems that talk. And then we were asking the questions, well, so how long does that take you each week? Maybe 10 minutes every 2 weeks to do that. Kind of sync up those two components between like payroll summaries into our financial system. And we thought that some of that manual labor, it'd be great to get rid of it, but it didn't really warrant the expense to the tax base for such a small need that we would process at different times. So although we were really excited with the software, we thought there were a lot of benefits. We all kind of thought at this point in time, we'd rather look at investing a smaller amount and proceed in that direction to get some of the changes we're looking for.
What I liked about the recommendation that they're making is that our current systems, if we expand them and use everything that they have available to us, we'll get a lot of the issues resolved that I know some of the board members had concerns with, the duplication of effort. So by making a small investment into our current software packages, we can address a lot of those concerns and not spend $350,000 or $105,000 on other packages and still provide the same level of services that we do now. So I agree wholeheartedly with the recommendations that the committee came up with.
Thank you, Mark. And it's important to note that when we talked to these other towns, other departments, there was no clear, it wasn't like these people had the software and now they had less employees. It was pretty much on par with what you'd expect for our town sizes. They just have way more software expenses.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in some of the towns that have Munis, or at least one of the towns you looked at that had Munis, they also brought in Vadar.
Several of the towns were on a combination of the two software, saying, well, our treasury department liked Vadar, so our financial department moved to this, but not this one. And so they were back in kind of the same boat we were in. Where
So it's
and that was what I was saying, where some people don't like that end-all solution because they find someone else is more better for them. So.
And I think, and the department heads are here, one of the things that I heard from them is that they like what they're using now, and they're used to doing it, and it's working for them. And going through a conversion, say in the accountant's office, if say we were to convert to Vadar, she would need to keep the old system up and running if we ever wanted to go back and do history, because you wouldn't be able to convert the old data. So for a while, our accountant would be running 2 different software packages, which seemed to defeat the purpose of trying to consolidate and make things easy for everybody. So the bottom line is I think we can make improvements with what we have now moving forward. Does anybody want to add anything? You guys are all here. Please come up, give your opinions. And
Can I just come up and sit next to Mike for a moment?
Have a seat.
Just wanted to say a few things since I think converting the financial software would probably impact the accounting department more than any of the other departments in town. I think it would benefit almost all the departments to make some changes to gain some efficiencies, but it would really make a huge difference in the accounting department, just a huge difference. What we want to remember is that we bought into this system, Avila, in 2003. So we've got like 15 years of history on this system, which would basically, it would be lost. We wouldn't have access to it. We'd have to keep a legacy system on the side for that. And right now, we've got that, right at our fingertips. And there's nothing really wrong with the system. It's not broken. I think we've gotten an incredible value on this for 15 years. And I'm not seeing, from interviewing Munis and Vadar, yeah, they're beautiful, they're flashy and everything, but I'm not seeing that it's going to give us anything more than what we're already doing beyond the integration. And when we talked to Abila, they said, well, you guys haven't invested in Abila since you bought it in 2003, and they've made improvements since then. They've got some modules that are really worth looking at, and they do offer some integration. So what we could do, something that I think would be really huge for our departments, is to give them some control over their own budgets. This is something that's really important to me. We asked the department heads to create a budget for their departments for the upcoming year, and then it's hands off for the rest of the year. If they want to look at their budget, they have to call accounting. They have to. Hopefully, I'm at my desk and they can request a report. If I'm not there, they'll leave a message, and then maybe I'll see it in half an hour. But when I get the report to them, now that window that they had, that they were going to look at the report and analyze their budget, now they're into something else. What we can do with Abila that we hadn't realized we could do is give the department heads an opportunity to be able to input their own expenses right to the budget lines that they created for themselves at the beginning of the year. So they know where they wanted to put their supply budget and their telephone budget and their fuel budget. They know what lines those were. They can do their own purchase orders, their own expenses right to those lines. Accounting would just be reviewing and finishing up the accounts payable process, but they would have control of that rather than handing their bills to us and hoping that we're hitting the right budget lines, and then we have to go back and reconcile with them. It's going to cut out a middle step that they're currently doing, where they're using QuickBooks to process their own bills, and then they're sending the QuickBooks report to us along with the invoices, and we're re-inputting everything. So that's where we're losing a lot of the efficiencies. We'll cut out that. They can directly input right to Abila. There's several different steps of approval process. Once it gets approved, then it's all integrated. And then they can run their own reports afterwards, which I think is really, really important. So they can monitor their budgets anytime they have a minute. If they get off the phone and it's in their head right now and they want to look at their reports, they don't have to wait until I get to it. So I think that's important.
What's the added cost? That's the $9,000
That's about
added cost.
$9,500.
Right.
Makes perfect sense.
And not only, and for any user, for the finance committee, they could go in and look at budgets if they're interested, or the select board or whoever. It would be out there, it would be available. And I just think that giving the department heads who are actually not only crafting their budgets, but then trying to manage those budgets all year long, the opportunity to have a hands-on impact on those things is really enormous. So I think that would be an enormous step forward. And we wouldn't be having to go through an enormous conversion process. It would be, it's a module that MIP or Abila already owns. I think, I don't know. I would like the chance to explore this and see whether we can achieve the efficiencies that were holding us back, maybe, by taking this small step rather than a major leap into some software that's going to be very expensive, but it's still going to work basically the same way as the thing we're doing now.
So the recommendation to the board is to stay where we are now, expand the current services, make a small investment into the software. We can either do it at the fall town meeting or build it into the budget process for fiscal year '21. And I would like to continue down that path. I mean, we have, as Patricia just explained, the accounting software. We're going to look at the time and attendance. Payroll has already gotten better with some of the improvements that we learned through this process. So it's been a very beneficial process to the departments and to the overall financial operation of the town. And Mike has really done a great job working with us and leading us through this and getting us to a point where we realize what we have is pretty good.
Spicky.
So I'm sorry, this is a very basic question. What does ERP stand for?
Enterprise Resource Planning.
Okay, thank you. And you answered my question just now about when we would need to spend that money. It sounds great to me. I like the idea that our employees are really actively involved in choosing what is going to work well for them. I want to hear, is there a downside to this? And I am not the person to make any decisions about software, so people who might have more expertise.
I think the biggest downside would be anyone who might interpret it as a opportunity cost lost if that is the solution they felt we should be going in. That, we spend time continuing down this path that we want to, if someone thought one of these other solutions was the better area to invest in, we're now losing time
I
spending
see.
continuing. That's the only downside I see.
And you refer to the select board liaison, who I think is John
Yep.
Geiger, is that right, John? Are you the select board
Yes.
IT liaison? And I know you're the person who brought to our attention when we were setting our goals, the fact that there's a certain amount of duplication of effort and paper record keeping. So I guess I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this recommendation.
I have a number of thoughts. First, I'm pleased to see that we've come this far, and I commend all the department heads and Mike for working together and looking at these various options. For a first stab at doing one of these enterprise resource planning overviews, I think we did well. Now, we were highly focused on how much it was going to cost, very highly. Almost to the extent of being able to spend a significant amount of time looking at what things were costing us now. In some cases we did, but in others we really didn't do the whole thing. So I think this is an excellent next step. I'm a little disappointed that these numbers didn't surface before we closed the budget. And I really don't want to see us wait till 2021 to implement some of this stuff, because the opportunity's sitting there. And we know about it.
Yeah, we were kind of thinking we were going to go after the more big dogs, and so we were, not going to rush
Yeah,
a
it's just
$360,000
unfortunate,
purchase.
No,
but
but-
to the board, I think we need to see if we can find funding.
We still have
And
time
move
to,
ahead on this.
yeah, we do have time to amend the budget prior to the setting of the tax rate at the fall town meeting. And I know financial issues aside, but that is technically when you can do stuff like that. We're getting in final new growth numbers. The conference committee state aid number came in $8,000 higher than I know it's not a lot of money, but it's $8,000 higher than we anticipated. So there are some massaging of the budgets that we have to do before we set the tax rate in the fall. So if we want to address it, if the board wants us to attempt to address it in the fall, we can do that.
And we have
I
free
encourage
cash,
that
right?
the board
I'm sorry?
prioritize.
We have free cash in the fall.
No, but we also have available tax levy by the final new growth number and the final state aid number.
I see, okay.
So I encourage the board to prioritize that high when we're looking at how we may make some modifications.
We'll meet again and talk about putting a formal proposal in on that.
In terms of what's the potential downside, a piece of what we're doing, and I'm not finding fault with it, is perpetuating the growth of a problem that isn't going to go away, and that's this database. And at some point, if Avila went out of business or decided not to continue to support their software because it was no longer profitable, they didn't have enough users or whatever, that problem is going to surface its ugly head again.
Well, no, Abila's database it's running on like a Microsoft SQL Server newest edition. That's a very modern database technology, much similar to what Munis would do.
Okay, well, what's the system that we have to keep running?
That is Abila right now. She was saying if we switched to Vadar, they would not do they would not do a migration, so we'd have to continue to keep Abila with or without paying them annual maintenance
You'd be running
costs.
two
So-
software
Or migrated.
that wasn't an option with
Migrate, it's not an
Vadar.
option.
Well, they won't, but that doesn't mean it can't be migrated. that's my point.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
but-
so
yeah,
They don't want to take it on, but that doesn't mean it. But that's something now you need, kind of put up on the
Yeah.
wall that said, that's a little flashing yellow light there that says, this,
That was more of a Vadar thing than an Abila thing, though. Abila's database technology could be, easily worked with. It's standard stuff that can be pulled out of.
and then the last thing I need, and this is more for me, but I'm gonna have to spend some time with you because I go to Abila's website, I have it right in front of me, and I printed stuff out this afternoon trying to find these applications that you specified, and I can't find them anywhere.
And so that company has been purchased by a company called Community Brands. Very difficult to find one of their 200 software products their teams work on. You have to look for Abila MIP. And,
Well, I went to Community, whatever it is.
Yeah, Community Brands
And I
there.
looked all around there too. And one thing just took me back to the homepage, took me back to the
when I
homepage. So
spoke to them, I let them know
I want
that
to understand
they,
better from you what these applications are.
Gotcha.
And what they do for us, that's all. I
And
just
we
want
do,
to get
we need to
educated.
do some more research, and make sure we'd be happy with it. And if it turns out in, 4 or 5 months, we tried, but we're just not gonna make it work, we certainly still have Vadar, that I think would probably be our second choice, but I just don't see any reason to jettison this, the software that's been working for us for such a long time.
So what, I support
Before we try this.
and encourage the board to support what's been recommended.
Other questions, Josh?
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation and the work and the due diligence because I think it's something that's long overdue to take a look at this. And I certainly understand the apprehensiveness about leaving something that you're familiar with to go to something that you're unfamiliar with that doesn't offer you the ability to migrate your software and costs a boatload of money. So with that said, that certainly doesn't mean that's the wrong move, okay? But we're later this evening contemplating a charge for a new committee, a major initiative planning committee. And I think that that would be a great charge to have them look at the cost-benefit analysis of this. Because in addition to what you're talking about here, there's also the cost of getting everybody up to speed with the software in terms of, labor costs here in town as opposed to not doing what everybody's typically doing, as well as running the two software programs in parallel due to the lack of migration supported by each company. So, obviously, less is more in this case because it's certainly a substantial amount less money. And I guess I'll support it, but in closing, before we support increasing the budget by 50%, because that's what we're talking about doing. Right now, it seems like we're getting quite a bargain. We're looking at $22,500 a year for what we have, as opposed to options that are $127,000 for the first year for Vadar and $400,000 to go to the Munis system, and that's just first year costs. So,
And the annual costs are triple?
I see.
Okay, now. Double?
most more than double, yeah.
More than double.
So at any rate, I'd like to see you explore the modules a little bit farther for the ones you're not getting. And if we are going to go to fall town meeting and the warrant is open and Mark's going to consider, along with the board, putting it on there, let's just dot the i's and cross the t's, and I say, bring it to town meeting if you think it's the right thing. Thank you.
Great, thank you,
Great
everyone.
job. Anything else?
I just have one other point.
Yes, John.
And I made this point sort of like the first time I sat with Mike and Mark. As we look down the road, 3, 4, 5 years out, as work expands in the town hall, we, I believe, are under an obligation and a responsibility to the taxpayers of this town to apply technology just as well as we possibly can, as opposed to believing that we're going to hire more people. Because,
I agree with that.
and so we've got to focus on that
Yep.
to make sure that we're taking care of the employees we have, but it's unlikely we're going to add many more, if any more.
I couldn't agree with
So
that.
we need to
People only want
exhaust
that number
what
going
tech-
down, right?
So we got to exhaust what technology will do for us and how it can help us. So that's rattling in the back of
Absolutely.
my mind, and I
Yeah,
agree with you
and
guys.
that's as we do cost benefits, you know, I remember asking Tricia when we were looking at this, I said, well, if we're gonna up a budget by 35,000, would you rather have that go into the software that might help you out, or would that be labor hours? What would give you the bigger benefit? And she was like, oh, labor hours more than what that's gonna offer me. So it was like, all right, well, let's keep that in mind then of how much of a benefit she just saw there, so.
Thank you.
So for me, I don't get to call on myself formally exactly, but
You got that hammer
you know,
now, so.
I certainly trust the department heads. You guys know what you do day to day, and you know what you need to do it. It's somewhat laughable to me that I would come in and be like, well, here's what you're gonna get, and here's what you're gonna get, and that would be absurd. You know, that said, if we're running a program that's 15 years old, at some point, you know, we can't remain
Oh,
wed.
the program, we're paying maintenance and it's updated every
Understood,
year,
understood.
so
But
it's-
if this isn't something we've revisited in 15 years, you
Yeah.
know, at some point we may need to make a change. And to me, it's difficult to kind of hear or feel like I would hear down the line that we're staying with this because we've always had it. That becomes difficult. You know, I think it makes sense to see what Avila can do and to get a better understanding of how that works, and revisit this perhaps in a year-ish and get an update back from you guys as to what you've seen change, what improves.
So if we do implement the Avila solution, come back to the board a year from now and say, hey, by the way, ACEs worked well, or, you know, we were wrong, we need to revisit the.
Right.
That makes sense.
I mean, for me, you know, the biggest concern I have with kind of how things are working right now is just the risk, and in my experience on the school committee several years ago, when there was kind of a very basic data re-entry issue that created a huge financial snafu. You know, so it would be important to me to understand if we're choosing to re-enter data, and I understand why that makes sense, what are we doing to kind of minimize those risks, and how are we moving forward? But it sounds like, you know, certainly at this point, understanding what Avila can offer, how it integrates, what changes it would, you know, make day to day for all of you guys is the first thing we need to explore.
It's, yeah, I think it's a good point. And, you know, one last thing I want to say too is when we talk to these other towns, it's what Trish has been doing with the budget for her software. It's unheard of in these other towns. It's there for the financial aspect alone, $40,000-$50,000 plus add-on modules. It's, you know, I guess maybe we've been a little bit spoiled that she's got us this far with what it is, but it's, you know, when we talk to peer communities, they're, oh no, this is how much we pay, and it's, you know, don't even bother mention what we pay because they're going to get upset.
And that's great. I mean, we certainly appreciate the New England frugality and the ability to do a lot with less than your peers. That said, I don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish
Exactly,
either.
and that was what we were concerned about,
You
if
know,
that's what we were doing, but it
if
turned out
everyone
we-
else has this other product that does this, there may be a reason.
Well, I just want to say one last thing. One of the nice things about having standalone, non-integrated financial software is that there's many fewer errors in it when you have fewer people inputting into it. You know, everything that's in the financial software, all those numbers, I know exactly where they've all come from. So when you have 20 people inputting into a piece of software, there's more ways for things to go wrong. So we're able to control it, I guess, perhaps that's the word. We're able to control the accuracy.
Or you know who to
input.
blame for the mistakes.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's sort of a hidden benefit of it, but it's probably, it is inefficient to be re-entering everything that everyone else is doing. We find a lot of problems and we fix them before they hit the general ledger, which is wonderful. But at some point, you're exactly right. We have to take the next step and start, letting the department heads have control of their own budgets. Which, again, that's a thing for me. I'm really very excited about that, and I'm glad that the system we're looking at is going to allow us to go down that path. So I think that's necessary.
Sounds good. Any other final questions, comments?
Great presentation, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for all the work.
While Mike's here, I'd like to go to the next subject, and I want to walk the board through this. Thanks, Mike. I want to walk the board through this slowly so that there's a complete understanding. As you know, we were authorized for $6 million $6,401,291 in capital costs at the Springtown meeting. The DPW building, the library roof, and then a fire truck. So the plan that we presented to the select board when we did all this was that we would temporarily finance the 3 projects through the completion of the projects, and then permanently finance 2 of them, that being the DPW garage and the library roof, once both projects were completed, so we had exact costs. So the purpose of the bond issue that we're bringing you tonight was to do a short-term bond through February 21st, 2020, to bond this money, and then to permanently finance the library and the DPW garage, and then continue to do a short-term note on the fire truck and pay that off over 5 years. That's the plan that we presented to the board at the Springtown meeting. Is that clear? Does everybody get that? So, Mike, go ahead.
The thing that's a little confusing to me is it doesn't appear that the fire truck is included in the bond that we're gonna go out. to get.
It is there. If I wasn't clear about that, I'm sorry. We bonded, we went out with the $6 million number, $6.4 million number, including the library, DPW, and the fire truck.
Okay, because there was some comment in there about we were gonna do the fire truck over 5 years.
Yes,
and-
that's what I just said. We're gonna permanently
But
finance.
isn't that through a state
Correct.
program that gives
Correct.
us a good rate on the 5-year? Right.
Yep, but we were gonna do a short-term note on all 3, and then continue the short-term note on the fire truck for 4 more years after that. So Mike put out a note working with our financial advisor. We went out last week, and we received 6 bids, but 5 of them were actual bids on the bonds. And the bids range anywhere from 1.41 to 2.23%. Now, 1.41 is an unbelievable short-term interest rate. And the last time we did a short-term bond,
2.4.
2.4%.
Wow.
So you can see a market change right now. And what is really exciting about this is because of our AAA bond rating, the bonding people that came in, and BNY Mellon Capital out of Pittsburgh was the winning bid, as I said in my town manager's report. They were willing to pay a $29,080.
I'm sorry. So we're having some confusion. It looks like we're in different versions. The one that's in the packet that's in our drive is the current one.
Right.
So I don't know.
This is the old one.
Okay.
So I might be reading, because I'm going along with this, and I'm looking in your town manager's report.
That's what I'm talking about right now.
Is that the one though that was in the email or that's
No,
in our
this is-
Google Drive?
On this,
I'm gonna explain what changed right now. If you let me continue, I'll get to the
Yeah,
point.
because I see something.
Yep.
We had a timing lapse.
Nope.
Yeah.
So we got a $29,083 bond premium paid to the town with these notes. What that means is all of our bonding costs, payments to bond counsel and our financial advisors are being paid. That's $19,000 out of that bond premium. And then the remaining $10,000 allowed us to borrow less money than the $6.4 million. So we're actually only bonding $6,392,000. So that's what you're talking about, Josh.
No. But go on.
But he would have.
But he would have. So
well,
be-
so that number up there that
that
says.
that's the number that was authorized by town meeting. But
Okay.
because of the bond premium paid to us, we're only gonna do a short-term note on $6,392,000.
Okay.
So the fire truck, instead of being $650,000, we only need to bond $649,000. The library roof, instead of being $1,131,041, we only have to bond $1,130,000. And on the DPW building, instead of bonding $4,620,000, we only have to bond $4,613,000. It's because of that bond premium, because of our AAA rating, that we're actually saving the taxpayers money. And we did not have to come up with money to pay the bond costs, to the bond counsel, and to our financial advisors. Outstanding. You could not have received better information out of this bond issue. So this is excellent news all around.
And that 29,000 pairs with the 1.4%
Correct.
loan. Those
Yes.
So, can I give you my
Yeah.
concern then?
are. Yeah, absolutely.
Or my question, more than concern. So you're never gonna hear me complain when it costs less money. Many people don't complain when it's like that, unless of course it's a government contract. However, you have 1.4%, is that correct?
1.41%, yep.
How come in the motion on the vote of the select board, it says 2.25%?
2.25% is the coupon rate, they call it. The net interest cost is 1.41%. That's what we're gonna be paying interest on, 1.41%. There is a coupon rate in the permanent and short-term bond market out there with these major financial institutions. And the coupon rate doesn't equate to the net interest cost that we're gonna be paying for borrowing this money.
For example, to follow up on that, when we permanently financed the senior center last year, the overall rate that we paid was 3.23,
something like that.
yes, but the coupon rate that he was talking about was a little bit higher. But the net cost to the town over the life of the 20 years was the 3.23. This is similar. It's confusing, it confuses me, but when our financial advisors tells me that we're paying 1.41%, we're paying 1.41%.
To use the expression, if you do the math, we're gonna be paying 1.41%. There are tax advantages to these 6 bidders that came in and tried to, buy this debt for us. And I don't profess to know why they do it, but it ties into somehow this 2.25% coupon rate versus what we're actually going to be paying them back.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question. So it has to do with the senior center. Do we have the ability, once we bond something, to renegotiate the bond with another company, pay it off and get it at a lower rate?
You have to go X amount of years
years.
before you can refinance it, so we're not even close to
So
being
we're
able to
so
do that.
locked in.
We
You
are
gotta go
locked into the senior center.
halfway through before you can revisit it as a refinance.
Is it halfway? It's halfway, yeah.
It's halfway,
Halfway
yeah.
through.
It's halfway or 10 years, whichever is earlier.
Josh, if we had, we took a risk back a year ago on what the rates were gonna happen, and we locked in the senior center based on the advice that we received from our financial advisor, we got a pretty decent rate. Wasn't upset with the rate. Had we waited, would the rate have been better? I'm gonna say it probably would have, but we locked in when our financial advisors told us was the best opportunity to lock in on the senior center.
Mark did a good job explaining this, but we actually stepped out of the purview of the State House note system that Becky referred to. So we went outside the State House note system because we were advised that $6.5 million would have been too much for the local bidders, the local bidders that we're used to seeing, the Unibank out in Whitensville, Eastern Bank down in Boston. They're big institutions, but they wouldn't necessarily be capable of doing this. So what we did was a short-term note through the nationwide system, if you will, through the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so the paperwork that you're going to be signing reflects a little bit of a difference versus you're not going to see some paperwork that's going back to the people at the Department of Revenue this time. We're borrowing this for 186 days, short-term, at 1.4%. And as part of that bidding process, we included in the bid that they need to come up with the reimbursement to us for all our issuance costs, and the winning bidder went $10,000 above that in this case, which was quite a thing, I've been told.
It is.
Yeah.
But to fall back on Becky's point, come February, when we permanently finance the 2 major projects, the remaining balance of the fire truck will go through a State House note because it's a much smaller number. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. We're going to, all things being equal, in February and March, we'll be taking out the 2 major items as a permanent bond, and we're going to continue on with the short-term plan with principal pay downs for the following 4 years. The article shows $140,000 in the first year out of ambulance receipts, and then we're dealing with a much smaller.
Do we know what
balance.
do we know what the interest payment is going to be in fiscal year 20? Because we're gonna have to raise that at the fall town meeting to pay off this short-term note in fiscal year 20.
I don't have it detailed right at this minute.
We'll get that number for the
Yeah.
board, but there's gonna be a debt payment, interest payment in fiscal 20.
So at this point, it sounds like the DPW and the library, we're not permanently funding because we don't have exact amounts, right?
Correct.
Is there potential, given that these rates are so low at the moment, is it worth kind of taking a stab and permanently funding
Doing it
an
now?
estimated number?
Well,
And then, I
Well-
mean,
no, because once we did this, we're locked into this for 6 months. We can't do anything else until we permanently finance the project in February 21st. So sometime this winter, we'll be going out to permanent financing.
We've done a lot of the groundwork already for the permanent bond, so come January, which is kind of right around the corner, our financial advisor's telling us that we're in a very good long-term spot in January to take these out long-term.
And we'll have exact numbers, Allison. I'd rather go out with exact numbers than, because don't forget, we have contingencies built into these two budgets. I'm hoping that the project costs come in less, so we actually bond less and it'll be better for the taxpayers. So, well, I understand what you're asking. I think, the way we did this is short-term, get the project done, permanently finance the total project costs, final project costs, rather.
Kind of like, for example, didn't you get some good news last week about the generator over at the senior center, which would reduce the cost?
No, because we already permanently financed it. But what that does though, but Josh, that's a good point, because we are allowed to now take whatever remaining money in capital projects that's left over and then apply them to future capital projects. So when the senior center's done and Patricia closes the books, when we go to permanently finance those projects, we can use whatever the remaining number to offset some of these future costs. And we can do that through a town meeting vote, correct? So we have a lot of options available to us. So that said, unless there's any other questions, the board, the clerk of the board actually, needs to sign off on and make a motion on a vote of the select board. I sent it out to you this afternoon so that you have a chance to see it. It came in from bond counsel, and this is the actual vote that the board has to take. I could read it into the record, and then the board could vote it, or the board can say voted as presented, which I think will be a lot easier, but I'll leave it up to the board's discretion on how you want to handle it. But the bottom line is good news all around on the notes, on the interest payment, and on our finances. And again, our AAA bond rating has really been a good thing for the taxpayers of the town of Groton. So we need to do everything in our power to maintain that AAA rating.
all right, so,
When we start this paperwork down the line, this particular vote is only signed by the clerk.
That's John.
And there's 4 copies of that. The rest of it all requires, well, I need at least 3 signatures of this. And I mean, I would be remiss, this is Hannah Moeller. You all know Hannah. She's our assistant treasurer collector. She came to speak towards the financial software review, but everybody else did a good job doing that. And Hannah is a very critical part of my office and our staff, so
Just a good learning experience to listen to all of
and
this.
Hannah, is always trying to learn, so this is a nice package we're giving you
For all
tonight.
those flags, you need 3 signatures on every single one of those pages.
5 would be nice, right?
Well, I have, in a lot
5
of
would
it
be great, Joshua, yes.
yeah, 5 would be great, and they're all tabbed out.
Okay.
And you're gonna see them, I just can't miss a tab, but the first
That's one
section
only
is
John
gonna go just to
Riley.
John Riley, yeah.
Okay.
So does the board want to vote as presented, or do you want it read into the record?
As long as you attach it to the minutes,
That's what I
I'd be
was gonna
comfortable
I'll
with it.
attach this to the
We
minutes.
So I move that we authorize the clerk of the select board to sign the bond anticipation note agreement language as presented.
I like that.
That sounds good.
That's a good motion.
Nice job.
I'll second that. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Having done all this, then, we'll get our money on August 5th, and Mark could maybe speak further, but the projects, with the exception of the fire truck, that's not due to come in until the
Next year.
spring. But we'll have the money in hand. The other projects have started incurring some costs. And I think that they're scheduled to be done by November.
They're supposed to be
December.
done, the library roof will be done in December, and the DPW will be done in January 3rd, I think, is the completion date, right? I believe. December 3rd, something like that. They have 180 days from whenever I issued the.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Garage is
Thank
gonna
you so
be the
much.
library.
Garage is gonna beat the library, and it's gonna beat the senior center.
Can we,
And you need
Guys.
another motion?
Can we just hold off on signing them so that, until the end, so they don't get mixed in with everything?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Oh,
And then
well,
Dawn
it's like-
can-
Well,
I
I'll
don't
give
want
those
you
to you
guys to have to stay, is that
No,
okay?
no,
And
no,
then
we're
you
gonna,
guys
I'm gonna
can
stay
check
for a
them
little
and-
bit longer, but then Dawn said she'd
Motion
collect
is-
everything up for me, yeah.
The major
Do
one?
I wondered if we needed another motion
'Cause
about
we-
this signing.
'cause we
Nope,
authorized-
that vote allows you to sign those.
Oh, does it?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you want us to hold off on signing?
I would just prefer so it doesn't get mixed
Are
in.
you okay,
And
Mike,
we're
not
not
wanting
trying
Yeah,
to do
Dawn's
that
gonna,
while we're,
Dawn's gonna stay the whole
Okay.
meeting, she said, yeah.
lucky girl.
You're not gonna leave?
All right.
All right.
Did the
We're
board
gonna-
vote that? Did I hear, did the board vote?
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yes, we did.
Thank you. Michael, Hannah, thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you, guys.
Thank you.
Going on to the next thing, another one of the board's annual goals was to create a major initiative and capital committee. If you go to page 25 in your packet, you will see the draft charge that Joshua and I created. I had sent that out to the board in your packet on Friday, asked for feedback if the board so chose. I know Josh shared it with some people that had contacted him on it, and they provided feedback as well. So I took all of Josh's comments and comments from others, and I updated the charge, and I sent it out to you. The major change in the charge are items 5 and 6.
So we need to be in the version that's in our packet.
In your
our
packet,
Google
yes,
Drive.
because I clearly marked it revised at 12, it was actually 12 PM when I sent that out, so that's exactly when that charge was revised. So the two major changes are items 5 and 6 in the board responsibility. And the reason that those are added there is that this committee will also evaluate service enhancements expected to impact the town's operating budget by more than $30,000. Basically, if, for example, if you had a proposal to go 24/7 on the fire department and had 4 full-time firefighters, it would be an impact greater than $30,000 on the operating budget. This committee would take a look at that. I think that made a lot of sense, and I agreed with Josh on adding that to the charge. And we also added that this committee would also work with the board to conduct in-project reviews and status if the board so deemed. Now, I give you an update every week when you meet on the various projects that are going on, but if there's something the board wants to further delve into, this committee would look at that as well. So those were the major two changes to the charge that was given to you, the original charge that was given to you, those items 5 and 6, and there's some wording changes to complement those two additions, that they're looking at more than just capital expenditures, they're looking at all major initiatives into the budget. I think it's a good charge. I enjoyed working with Josh on it. I think we touched on everything that the board had in its goals to create this committee. And I would like, if the board decides to approve this charge, I'd like to advertise it and hopefully bring back some appointments in September. You know, advertise it for a month, bring back some appointments for the board to make, interviews or whatever, depending on the amount of people that apply for it, for the board to make those appointments in early September so that they're up and running when we go into the budget process. So that's the proposal. Josh, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, yes, there is. So I certainly want to thank Mark for really getting this final version together and all the words, because basically he just got a bunch of bullet points and he really created this document. And I also, this is something that was near and dear to former select board member Petropoulos. And after he left the board, kind of picked up the torch for him, and it took a while to get this out. But I want to thank Jack for pushing this and constantly needling me, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Because if he didn't do that, it might not have happened. So thank you to Mark, thank you to the board members and other members of the public that reached out. But this is very, very important that we do this, because we need to look at everything that we're considering moving forward and not just be dealing with one project in isolation without looking at the collective amount of projects that are coming down the pike, because we certainly have a lot out there right now between the senior center, just having built a fire station, having Indian Hill come online, a new DPW garage, and everything associated with the 24/7 fire department that just went online. So we really need to make sure we're looking to make sure that we don't get in financial trouble, because as Mark likes to say, we want to maintain our AAA bond rating for a long time moving forward.
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Becky?
Yeah, I will echo some of what Josh said. I think it's a really important, and I think it's really well created. I did have one observation, one place that I thought we should consider changing. On the first page, under paragraph C, the sentence says that this committee will assist, it's like in the third, fourth, let's see, fifth line. It will assist the town manager in developing the annual 5-year capital plan, including capital equipment, blah, 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 blah. But then on the second page, bullet point number 2, it says, at the request of the town manager, the committee will assist in the development. And I think that that is an inadvertent, probably error, and we should revise bullet point 2 to say, the committee will assist the town manager in the development of the.
That is a good catch.
You are correct.
And then I just had a question. Some of our town government is, some aspects are run by enterprise funds. That's correct,
Water,
right?
sewer, and electric light.
And which
cable.
are, water, sewer, and what?
Cable, electric light.
Cable and electric light.
But
So would this
Yeah, no, but
committee, so does, if an enterprise fund is in charge of some aspect of government, does that include that they are in charge of their capital assets?
that's a good question. Electric light, total separate, total outside, will never be part of this committee in
Right.
the review. Water, sewer, and cable are still the responsibility of the town manager with regards to approving their budgets and their capital plans. So this committee would have oversight on that aspect of it.
Okay,
Electric light, no.
Uh-huh.
Water, sewer, cable,
What
yes.
about the library? Where does that fit in?
Library is part of the overall capital
right,
budget.
okay. So the intention is that this committee oversees all of our stuff other than Geld.
Correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
Other questions, John?
I just had a couple of points I wanted to make. I want to encourage Josh and Mark to think about adding a paragraph in here that's definitions. Because as we go through here, in one place we talk about large equipment and municipal buildings, and then we talk about major alterations, construction, reconstruction, renovation, enlarge, major maintenance, demolitions, and then we have installation, renovation, or upgrade, service equipment, and major systems. I don't know what a major system is, and if I don't, they're not gonna be able to get their hands around what we're really responsible for. And I could go on, but I think you get the feel where I'm coming from. Let's define these things that we reference and then be consistent in using the various terms throughout the document. And the only other thing I wanted to suggest is that you add a G, a subparagraph G, with some words along the lines of that a review is required of the committee charged by the select board and the committee to fine-tune the committee charge annually, beginning not later than July 31st.
You and I talked
I
about
said,
that,
you and
Josh.
I spoke about
Yeah,
that
Josh and I
earlier.
talked about that. That's a good
I
thing.
absolutely agree.
Okay, good.
I mean, I agree, actually, I agree with the last thing you said, and I'm not disagreeing with the first thing you said. However, I will point out that there is language within the charge under D5, which will respond to anything more than $30,000. So I think by definition, that encompasses all the things that you may be concerned about. Am I wrong, John, or not?
Well, it's, item 5 reads, review and report the financial requirement of all projects. Now, if every one of these things I read
Oh,
is
no, no,
considered.
we
No,
talked about
that's
the
been
new, the
changed.
revised charge that I sent out to you.
Yeah, please,
Number
please look
five,
at number
and then
5 under
revised
D.
charge.
Just take a look at that, and that might address your concern. That was revised earlier today. A number had to be inserted.
Okay, what does that mean in terms of 3 projects of 10,000 apiece? They're gonna, that would equal 30,000.
if they're three disassociated projects, it would not get reviewed. If it's three associated projects, that would be the trigger.
So it's individual projects.
Correct.
So, that are more than, so
Yep.
that could be a little bit of clarity there.
There's so many
But
things
it
that
will
come
help,
up.
yes.
You know what I'm saying?
It will help.
That don't meet the criteria to get this committee involved in.
Right.
And I think $30,000, well, $30,000 is a lot of money in the course of, you know, a $4 million plus DPW and $1 million library roof. That is a very different number.
Right, so to me then that would suggest, I think that's a good statement in there, really thinning out all these things that we else have scattered around in here and simply stick with, that's what it is. If it's gonna cost more than $30,000 or whatever.
Do you
we're
want
saying.
to, do you want to just change the language in that paragraph to be a little bit more concise?
Well, I'm just wondering whether we need to keep, you know, structure, recreational structures, playing fields, courts, significant installations.
The more you say, the better.
But
Well, I don't know.
anything that's $30,000
Okay. Well,
worth.
Mark, do you have any
should
thoughts
be-
on that?
The reason I like that 30,000 is we usually put anything over $25,000 into the capital budget. So those things would automatically get reviewed by this committee. That's why I thought the number 30,000 was the right number, because that's the number that goes into the capital budget. So when you look at impacts to the budget, the only other thing that would be greater than $30,000 that's outside the capital budget is hiring a new employee. Okay, because there's not gonna be anything greater than 30,000 increase in the operating budget unless it's personnel costs. So I'm comfortable with the way this is worded. That's why I was very supportive of the wording in it.
No, but I'm just suggesting, instead of saying conduct periodic reviews and audits of physical conditions of all municipal buildings, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
Is that a separate task from reviewing things
Yes.
over $30,000?
Yes, that's a
Absolutely.
separate task.
Okay, so those are, it's limited to just those things?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then under a purpose, you got a bunch of things.
Yep.
Major alterations,
Well, that's what I
construction,
like your
reconstruction.
idea about adding a definition section here, and I'll do that.
So does
Okay.
anyone want to bring this back? I'd love to get this on the street.
Could we approve it tonight?
I think the
Move it
definitions
forward.
is,
Oh, I did have.
Actually, can I interrupt?
Actually, I did have somebody who requested that we move this off 2 weeks. Because they wanted to show up and speak to it, and it wasn't the person I mentioned earlier.
well, let me say this. I'd like to get this advertised as soon as possible, and one of the things that I'm gonna suggest on the definitions piece is that let me work with the committee. One of the first things is to draft definitions so that we're all on the same page as to what they're looking at. Instead of me coming up with it, I'd
Bring it
rather
back,
work with the
bring
5
it
committee
back.
members. So I agree with John 100%. I want to add the G part, that it's their responsibility to review this charge annually and make recommendations to the board. The first thing they'll do is come up with definitions. But I would like to advertise this now, have the board adopt it. I think it's in pretty good shape. And then let's try to get some appointments before the board in September. But
So
that's-
again, I'm gonna call on myself. I have some questions.
Yep, please.
So right now, this is really structured toward capital plan. And my concern is that I would like to see this group make sure that they're reviewing anything that's also spent out of free cash.
All of our capital items are, well, anything over 30,000 spent out of free cash, automatically they're gonna review it. It's right here in item number 5. Item number 5 is a very important clause in here.
Okay.
So the answer to that, Allison, is they absolutely would review that.
Okay,
Because any expenditure over $30,000 in a single year, they have to look at it.
okay. And then the other kind of buzzwords that I was looking for, and I'm not sure are in here, but they may be kind of conceptually, is kind of the prioritization. And then that this group to me would weigh in very heavily when, you know, the capital plan carries an anticipated amount and then actual bids come in dramatically differently. This would be the group that I would think we would be looking to say, you know, yes, then we need to consider funding all of this, or yes, this came in way over, and as a result, we're gonna bump this. So I don't know whether that's encompassed in here, or that's what other folks are thinking.
No, it's,
I think it's all part of what their responsibility is.
I don't think it would hurt under the purpose, under C, to insert one more sentence that says to prioritize the yearly or the fiscal year proposed capital plan purchases.
That's what the capital plan is. It prioritizes the year's purchases. You'd be repeating what you're already doing. The purpose of the capital plan is a prioritization of what you want to spend in that particular fiscal year. That's what they're going to assist me in putting together.
And then my last question, although I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the questions I've asked so far, is where is the finance committee on this? Have they weighed in, reviewed, talked about this?
I was told to bring this to the select board, and that's what I did. I was not directed to share it with the finance committee.
How can this hurt the finance committee?
I don't see that it can hurt the finance committee. I would love to have them as the financial folks in our community give this a quick read and get their input on it.
I'd
I
be
don't
more than
think
happy to
that's
share with them, but please,
unreasonable.
I was not directed to do that, so I didn't. So forgive me for not
However,
doing that.
I could add a little bit more background. We did discuss a version of this last October. And prior to that, there had been conversation that I was part of with Mark and Gary Green that got us rolling on setting this up. So I don't think that I don't think the finance committee has been ignored. I mean, there was, Gary was part of this conversation at the outset. I think there was, in fact, some conversation at some meeting, bless you, to the effect that, and I think Gary was the person representing, that the finance committee really did not see their role as being to do this, that he did see a need for this other committee to do this. I certainly, it should be shared with the finance committee.
You could handle this one of two ways. You could send, when does the finance committee meet again? September 3rd. So could you adopt this charge with the changes as brought forward tonight, subject to review and comment and potential edits by the finance committee? And then we could bring this back if they had an issue with this, to amend it, but in the interim, that would allow Mark to advertise it and put this together, so it's in place prior to the development of his budget, which he begins in October, I believe. And that it would be really important to have this committee seated. And if the finance committee doesn't meet till September, and then we get busy and it gets brought back, we might not have it in place. So that's my only-
Absolutely. I mean, I would be perfectly comfortable with Mark sharing it with individual finance committee members and just asking for their feedback.
I could do that right away.
Sure.
I've already made the note.
Can I also add, I had a comment from somebody in town who said, you shouldn't really limit this to a 5-year vision. We have built, I think, 2 buildings in town now, the fire station and the highway garage, with the idea of a 50-year lifespan. But components of buildings that have a 50-year lifespan might have only like a 30-year roof or something. So we ought to be keeping some of that stuff in an organized matrix beyond 5 years. My response to that comment was, I think that once the committee is formed, that is for them to decide.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you looking for from us, Mark? Do you want us to
I would ask
make a
the board.
motion, or what's
Yep.
your?
I would ask the board to make a motion to approve the charge as amended this evening, to advertise the vacancies, and to share it with the finance committee immediately, and receive feedback. And if the charge has to be amended over the next month or so while we're advertising the position, we can make those amendments from finance committee members. That's what I'd ask the board to
I
do.
adopt that as my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion or questions?
David Nugent, I'm on the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee is very interested in the capital planning advisory committee, or the MICA as it is now. They had asked me to follow up with the select board on it, so I'm very excited to see that this is moving forward. I think it has a lot of the aspects that Finance Committee was interested in. I'm sure Finance Committee will be interested in the details as it moves forward as well. I do know that there's a lot of good information through the DOR, capital improvement planning guides and such, with a lot of detail. And so I'm sure we can tap into those resources that are already there as well. So thank you.
Good to know.
There's one endorsement from the Finance Committee. Thank you, David.
All right, so then, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So last week, the select board, or last meeting rather, the select board approved a proposal from select board member Geiger on a plastic reduction,
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this
Reusable-
was plastic bag.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I have
Plastic
me confused.
bags.
Plastic bags. I'm losing my mind here. So the board voted to adopt the proposal that John provided you, and you directed me to insert it onto the warrant for the town meeting. You also asked me to run it by town council for a final review. I did that. Town council came back and said, great bylaw, very few comments. However, it has to pass muster with the Attorney General in the bylaw review. And I've worked in two communities, or he's worked in two communities, that had passed similar bylaws, and he believes that they would definitely pass muster, and the board may want to consider utilizing them. So he provided you with the Town of Mansfield bylaw and the Town of Cohasset bylaw. And so the question to the board tonight is, do you want to stay with the bylaw that John drafted, or do you want to insert one of the two that town council proposed instead? So my question to the board right now is, how do you want to proceed? And I guess I'd ask John first, it's his thing.
My recommendation, because I want to see this keep moving as opposed to get stalled here, is I believe the town of Cohasset bylaw most clearly ties to what I had drafted together. And I would recommend that the board adopt the same bylaw that Cohasset has had approved by the Attorney General.
So I would agree with that, John. I'm glad that that's your recommendation. I found the Mansfield one to be confusingly written because it started talking about exemptions before it told what the exemptions were. And I found that the Cohasset one, because it relied on a professional standard versus very complicated measurements of mils of plastic bags, to be easier to implement and more reliable over time, because if the professional standard changes, then the bylaw changes, as opposed to being locked in at one set of criteria. So I like the Cohasset one.
Any other
And Josh.
thoughts?
Yep. I like the Cohasset one too, but just looking at it, under B, hold on a second, excuse me, it has some definitions, and it talks about a recyclable paper bag. And then, you see where that is?
I have it right up on the screen, Josh.
Okay, thank you. Why can't it just say a recyclable bag? That's just my
could,
question,
but-
because there's other products besides paper and plastic out there.
Well, paper can be,
Well,
a
but the
paper
point
bag can
is,
be composed of raw wood, or when they mix up the brew to put through the presses, they can add post-consumer fibers into it. So this one gets use of some recycling, really recycling it as opposed to simply, so let's say burning.
but the point is, Josh, if we start picking away at it and making changes, then we have lost the benefit of using something that's already been approved by the Attorney General.
I'm just suggesting removing the word paper.
But-
That's all I'm saying.
But I think that's a dangerous thing to do. If the Attorney General's approved this,
dangerous.
why would we need to tweak it?
Because bags can be made out of grass, bags can be made out of wheat, bags can be made out of hemp, bags can be made out of a lot of things.
That's a
Why-
reusable bag. Those are reusable bags. So, I mean, you may be completely right, but if our purpose is to adopt something that isn't going to raise any alarms with the Attorney General and is going to slide through and get approved, if we start changing the one that we think that was already approved, then we have lost that benefit.
Look, I'll drop the argument. I hope you see my point.
Yes, I do. Do you want a motion?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I just have
Yeah.
Oh,
just one question, John, because I've been getting a lot of calls from the seniors about the plastic bags. They're telling me they can't use a paper bag because of the handles. What is your vision, or what do you see this, what type of bags are they? I don't have an answer for them. They're saying with their walker, they need the little plastic.
I will say, John,
Yep.
that Hopkinton has this bylaw, similar bylaw. And I use the Price Chopper in Hopkinton. They have paper bags with handles.
I've been trying to give that answer. I've seen the paper bags
Yeah.
with handles, and I don't, yeah.
I know the one in Hopkinton does.
But there's other bags that they have at, grocery stores that are not made out of paper and not made out of plastic. It's a recyclable bag. My wife goes shopping, she has 10 of them kept in the back of her vehicle. She brings them in, and when they bag them, they just put them in there, and they've got great handles on them.
Yeah.
And they're not too big, they're not too small.
Right.
There are alternatives. I personally will.
you have to pay for them, but it's like a
They're
dollar
99
a
cents.
bag.
Keep them
It's
forever.
$1.
And then
they
they
a long
last
time.
forever.
And those plastic bags, while they may be convenient and they may be great, and I use them for a million things, recycle them for work, if a whale or a dolphin or a turtle eats them, we've all heard the stuff going on, so
Or if they catch in a tree and
I
they
get
blow
it.
and you see them, for the next 3 years, stuck up in that tree where nobody can reach them.
okay.
So,
I
yes,
move-
I asked for a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I just want to ask one more question before we get to the motion. In looking at what they are calling a product bag,
What page is that?
page 31 of our packet, I think it's the first page, in which one would put loose produce, bulk items, unwrapped baked goods. So those will be banned at a plastic level as well, right?
No,
Those are like, you mean the little fruit bags?
That's how I'm reading this.
Yeah.
no, that's the definition, but it's not banned.
That's the
Yes, it
definition of what
is.
a product bag is.
If a store provides product bags to customers, the bag shall comply with the requirements of being either reusable, recyclable paper bag, or compostable bag.
Where is that?
Right here.
It's right, see, I put it up on the screen.
That's kind of the only piece that's giving me pause, is
Oh.
I don't
I see.
know, when you
Wait, I don't
go
even
pick out
see
your
that.
handfuls of green
It's right here.
beans, those are plastic bags.
Are you
I will
sure
say
you're
the
in
stores, the
Cohasset?
towns that have this, they actually have those produce bags.
Cohasset.
They are
They're
compostable.
compostable?
Absolutely.
It's right
So
at the
they,
end where it
other
says
communities that have
restricted
implemented this have it.
Mm-hmm.
2 towns that I shop in, Grafton and
Oh,
Hopkinton,
okay.
both
See.
comply with
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
And those bags put your apples and cherries and all that stuff in.
Right.
Yes, those are those types of bags. They are compostable.
Okay,
Excuse me,
yeah, as long as people are
aware of that.
kind of clear that we're changing that as well.
Okay, I move that we adopt the Cohasset plastic bag reduction bylaw as presented to us today, and as the one that we will present to our town for a vote.
I'll add that to the warrant if the board votes it.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Before you finalize it, though, you may want to look at the dates that are in here.
I'll fix it.
Yeah,
And decide whether you want to make it the 1st of January, the 1st of July, or when you want it
You
to
had it the
become-
1st of January in your proposed bylaw. I was gonna make the dates what you had in your original bylaw.
Okay, I had it broken in two. For the large stores, it was one, and then the smaller stores got a little bit more time, but just pick a date.
I will.
Either
will it,
somebody,
so my only concern would be that by January 1st, it may not have been approved at the state
Yeah.
level.
Oh,
that
you're right.
Stores will have
So
a
I
backlog
think
of
it should
bags,
be July
so we may
July
want to
1st?
go
July
to.
1st.
make it on the
That gives
15th.
everybody
Want to
enough
allow
time.
the
Plenty of
stores
time.
to get rid of their
Right, use up their
bags.
stock.
July
for the
1st.
fiscal year.
Yeah, I think you should go with July 1st. I think that's
Yep.
fair.
2020 makes
Yes.
a lot
Yeah.
more sense.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we
I
have a
agree.
motion on the table. Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
The town clerk has provided me with a memorandum for consideration, and that is on the Board of Registrars. Sally Hensley's term expires. The former Board of Registrars can't have more than 2 members from one political party. The town clerk is a member of the board by statute. So the board right now is made up of Mike, who's unenrolled, Jane Fry, who's a Democrat, her term expires next year. Sally Hensley is a Democrat, her term expires now. Dale Martin is a Republican. Her term expired in 2018, but the Republican Party hasn't nominated anyone, so she is serving until a successor is qualified. And we have not heard from the Republican Town Committee on that. So the Democratic Town Committee is recommending that Sally Hensley be reappointed. The board can make that appointment, as it will not change the makeup, and there'll be 2 Democrats, a Republican, and the town clerk. So I would ask the board to appoint Sally Hensley to the Board of Registrars for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2022.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any questions or discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
I would support this. I think it's a stacked deck, and if an issue ever was to come up, it's leaning Democrat. What is the, and I'm not trying to put Dale Martin on the spot here, but has she been attending and meeting the requirements? Because if she's not in place, or her term expired, is she still willing to do this? Has anybody checked with her?
That's an excellent question. The problem is the Republicans have not submitted any names, and unless, under the statute, unless the Republican Town Committee submits a name, we can't do anything. That's why Dale Martin is still on that board until we get a nomination from the Republican Town Committee, because that seat has to be a Republican, has to be.
And I did some reaching out to folks, and as of currently, what I've heard back from several folks is that there effectively is no Republican Town Committee.
I've heard that too.
So I don't know quite
What are the
where
job requirements of this?
that leaves us.
There are none.
There are none. So my suggestion strongly would be is that if anybody's listening to this meeting, if anybody from the press is here, if anybody is a registered Republican within the town of Groton, that they submit their name for consideration.
But it has to come from the town committee.
But if, there's gotta be another way of doing this.
Well, I will find out if there's another way, Josh.
Because it's
I don't
like-
think there is.
Look, it's just about fairness and equity, okay? That's all I'm trying to suggest. Without getting overly political, I'll leave it at that.
The board will remember when we had the recount last year. Was it last year? 2 years ago. We had to bring in temporary registrars
Right.
to get us through that. So I agree with you, Josh. We need to do something about this.
So do we have to do this today? We have no election
Well,
coming up.
you appoint Sally Hensley, that's fine. I mean, you're gonna keep 2 Democrats on the committee, unless you wanna change it, but right now you have 2 Democrats, 1 Republican. It's a Republican seat that's the
You
problem.
guys can vote however you want.
I think, my recollection is that when something like this came up before, we asked what the percentages were of registered.
25, 25, 50 is what I understand approximately.
In that neighborhood.
Approximately.
Yeah.
Okay.
This, for Becky, before you got on the board, for many years, there were 2 Republican seats and 1 Democratic seat in the town clerk. And the board made the change, I think, Josh, helped me out, 5 years ago,
Something like
to
that.
switch it to 2 Democrats, 1 Republican. So it ebbs and flows.
So those 2 seats have to be Democratic seats, right?
Well, you can't have more than 2 Democratic seats.
No, do they
They don't
have to
have-
be Democratic
No,
seats?
you can have 2
Okay.
Republicans and 1
That's
Democrat.
So you
least
have to
one.
have 1 Republican there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
get
that's
it.
what I'm saying,
I
do
understand
some
now.
outreach on this, but what you're saying is, without a town committee, there's no way to do this?
That's my understanding, but I'll look into it
Is there a
further.
way to respectfully ask if we could withdraw the motion, hold back on this, because there's no election right now? Let's get this
We need
resolved
to
and
look
do
at
it
the
right.
state law that mandates that we do this and understand clearly
Okay,
whether it
well-
has to go through a town committee. I'd be
Can we
surprised
also-
if it does.
Understand, Mark, I assume that the town committees could submit someone who's independent or unenrolled
They could,
as well.
yep,
Um,
because you
yeah,
just
I mean,
can't have more than 2 of a
yeah,
party.
so I guess if we can hold off on this a couple
Sure.
weeks and just get a little more clarity, it's definitely complicated, but
I will do that.
thank
So
you.
are we gonna hold off on
Yeah.
this? Is that
Yeah.
the
Thank
decision
you.
was? Okay.
Josh, you raised a very good point on this.
Thanks for pointing that out.
So back to the, that concludes the town manager's report, but under other business, I know there's two items that we're gonna talk about. One is the request from John to ask the Board of Health to consider proposing a restriction on food, on prohibiting food establishments from using polystyrene containers. So I'd ask the board to take that up now, and I know there's some information in your packet that John provided to you. I don't know if the board wants me to ask the Board of Health to do that or not, so that's the question.
I've been going to a place that serves a clamshell box, just like a styrofoam box, but it's made out of recycled paper. Works great. Works great. So,
John?
I stumbled into this. Mark had mentioned that Grafton had, what's it called, when a whole bunch of people sign?
The citizens
A
petition.
citizens petition, thank you, to ban the polystyrene cups,
And
plates, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I took a look at that, and then I took a look at a bunch of other towns that have already done it. Some of them did it back in 2012, 2014. So it's been around a while. And after looking at a lot of these and trying to figure out how it might work in Groton, because it involves food, it has to involve the Board of Health.
Right.
And the Board of Health has to inspect for sanitation and so forth, so that's the ideal body to be responsible for the enforcement. And so instead of writing something on my own, I talked to Mark, and it occurred to me that we, the board, might ask the Board of Health to consider it and see where they go with it. So I gave you a copy of the petition, I gave you a copy of Wexford's, I gave you a website called Mass Green, which has a great collection of information. And then I wanted to point out that the World Health Organization has changed their classification of the probability or likelihood of this stuff causing cancer. And they did it just in 2018. And they said that they've taken it from being a possible carcinogen to a probable carcinogen, which just puts a little more emphasis on why it's to everybody's good health to get rid of it.
I strongly support the idea of asking the Board of Health to consider proposing such a thing, and we could perhaps work together, jointly propose it if that's what they wish, but it is, if it's their purview, we should certainly ask them to consider it.
Do we have a feel for, or would this be part of what the Board of Health would look at in terms of who's currently using the polystyrene? Is that what it?
I would
In
hope they
Groton.
would do that. When the
I mean-
citizens petition came through in Grafton, they worked with the Board of Health, they petitioned, they went to all the food establishments, asked who had it, who didn't have it, asked about the process. It was probably the most detailed citizens petition I've ever seen in my life. And town meeting unanimously adopted it by citizens petition, but the Board of Health was in support, and they gave a list of all the businesses in town that were utilizing it and what the cost was going to be to ban it and use something different, like Josh described. So I would suggest we do that.
There are alternatives
Yep.
out there for everything.
Yep.
That's
Not that expensive alternatives either.
right.
Yeah.
And the other point is, well, let me leave that. Right, let's leave it where it is.
John, I have a question.
Sure.
Around town, I think the biggest user of those is Dunkin' Donuts, the cups themselves. So that would,
Right.
Yep, well, even Dunkin' Donuts can change, and
we know.
I'll tell you why. In Westford, it's already banned.
yeah.
So I stopped at a little Dunkin' Donuts up on Route 40 to grab an iced tea. And I walked in and there was a sign on the counter that said, "Sorry if you don't like our new coffee cups, but the town won't let us use any others."
I believe
So-
the new one up in Four Corners uses the new
Could be.
cups.
Well,
Already.
I I know that because we won't use the styrofoam ones at work anymore. We always ask for the paper ones.
Dunkin' Donuts is pledged to eliminate
right,
them
there you go.
entirely
Oh, yeah,
in
yeah.
2020. So I'm just wondering kind of what is left that we're addressing. I mean, I know
Well,
there's
I
some.
have
I'm
What
not
is
like-
left? Plastic cups and plastic straws.
I
Right, but
have lunch several times
but
a
they're
week
not
at
poly-
Johnson's. and
I'm just saying,
Burgers
you
or-
asked, she asked what
straws are not polystyrene.
No, I get it.
I was gonna say, I would not be
I don't know.
surprised to find that, in fact, we don't have any food establishments in Groton using
We
polystyrene,
don't see them.
because I think people are, a lot of the places are very aware. But I still think it's worth putting something on the books, because there may well be future development that they should know about it.
So I will ask the Board of Health. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'll second
I-
your motion. If nobody has.
Was there a motion?
Was there a motion?
Did I
I
make a
don't think there
motion?
was a motion.
Oh, I thought you made a motion.
I think I did.
Okay.
Did I
Well,
make
good,
a
then it's been
motion?
made and
Did I make a
seconded.
motion?
Okay.
She strongly supports.
You said you supported, you didn't make a motion.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we ask the Board of Health to consider proposing a restriction to prohibit food establishments from using polystyrene containers.
You still want to second that?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
So, under other business as well, I sent an email to the board last week describing some of the changes we'd like to make as part of the town hall renovation. As far as things go, nothing has changed since my last update. They've gone through and they've done a lot of the demolition. There's still some more demolition that needs to be done. But in the process, I had a conversation with Josh, and he said, you may want to think about making changes that make sense. Now's the opportunity to do it. And I took that to heart, and I said, you're right. So I sat down with some of the department heads, and we talked about where we can make some good changes here in the town hall, now that we have this opportunity to do this renovation process. The number one thing that came up was to move the Human Resources Office from the first floor to the second floor, up off of where the current kitchen break room is, and switch places with the kitchen. And the reason that I want to do that is Melissa is probably, along with Dawn, the person that I deal with most during the day. A lot of personnel issues, union issues, collective bargaining. Human resources is a very important function that I perform as the town manager, and Melissa is very important in that regard. Having her upstairs, I think, is a good idea. Also, her office on the first floor, the window's right there. Everybody looks in all the time and sees what's going on. And if an employee is coming up to have a private conversation, you can look in and you see who's meeting with Melissa. I think that's not a good thing. So by moving her upstairs, it adds a little bit of privacy, puts her with me, which I think is a good idea. By moving the kitchen downstairs, we've taken the copier, and I don't know if you've ever had to have a meeting in there when you need meeting space. It is the most crowded meeting room in the town hall. By moving it downstairs, what we're going to do is, we're not gonna have a copier in there. It is a longer room to allow for a table. The sink and the dishwasher would be along the side wall that abuts the bathrooms right now. So it would allow for a better meeting room. And now we would have a pretty decent meeting space here at the town hall, so you're not as crowded as you are in that where you were before. There's probably a cost of about $4,000. The insurance company's gonna replace all the cabinets because they were damaged, they would replace them. They don't care where they replace them. Where our cost would be the plumbing. There's obviously a plumbing line right outside where the water cooler is. Tommy D estimates between $3,000 and $4,000 to do that. I think it's money well spent, and I think the improvements to the building and to the operation would be enhanced. We're not gonna make any changes to Dawn's office, my office, or the accounting office. We're comfortable with the way those are set up right now. So this is the one change that I would like to implement. So I don't want to do that without the board's approval, because you're my bosses. So I'm bringing that to you, and I'm asking for you to allow me to make that change within the town hall. We will pay for it out of our minor capital budget and the municipal buildings budget. So that's my first proposal to the board, and I'd ask the board to vote to support that if you're so inclined.
Will that copier be relocated somewhere else on
Yeah,
this
the
floor,
copy
or is
right
that
now on the second
necessary?
floor, we've relocated it permanently inside the land use offices, so it's perfect. And now the public doesn't have access to that copier because there's always somebody there, and it's more secure.
So So it looks like part of the board has started signing things.
There's a lot to sign.
Understood.
Oh, sorry.
I'll make a motion that we approve Mark's request to relocate the kitchen to downstairs and the HR office to the upstairs.
I'll second it.
So just one question.
Please.
We have the money to do this?
Yeah, I just said, we're gonna take it out of the minor capital and the municipal buildings budget. We have some discretionary money in there for repairs
Right,
that
but I
come up.
thought that when we approved that, it was already pretty well allocated.
It's for repairs that come up throughout the year. There is some discretionary money in there for emergency repairs and things that come up. Tom's comfortable that he has the funds to do it. I wouldn't have brought it to you unless I had the money to do it. It's not going to increase the budget.
Any other questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Now, the second change, Jonathan is here, and Don Black, I asked you guys to come up to the table, because this is would be a little bit more of an involved discussion. One of the things that we've been working on is employee safety and the concerns for our employees. You know, there have been some issues where some people have come into town halls, have harassed employees, have harassed our own police department was harassed by some individuals. And so there has been a heightened concern with access to the offices here at the town hall. Now, this is a very open town hall. We welcome the public to come in. We want to serve the public, and that's important. But you also have to balance that against employee safety. We've always talked about it, and after the incident that happened with the police department, we decided to make a change in the water department office, where we're going to take the door, which is similar to that glass door that you see over here, take the glass out and put in a new piece in that door that has a little counter space for you to slide something through, and a microphone that you would talk, not a microphone, but a speaker area that you would talk into, similar to what you see in the treasurer's office downstairs. That way, that door is always shut, and only employees have access to get in there. That door is locked at all times. So we were very happy dealing with that. That was our first improvement, which we're going to do, and we were going to do. In the meantime, something happened a couple of weeks ago in the assessor's office that made our employee down there very uncomfortable. That is a very open office that you can walk into. There are files on the desk, there are personnel things, there are things within that office that you really don't want to have people have access to. And you have sometimes employees in there all by themselves. Now, you got a 6'3" man who's a very large man who's probably not scared of a lot of things other than me, working in that office, and that's all well and good, but sometimes he's not there, and you have a female employee working in there by herself, which causes me some concern. A couple of weeks ago, an individual came into the office and a couple of times walked around the counter over her shoulder onto her computer, made her really, really uncomfortable. And she was in there by herself, and she had to move that person back, I believe twice. She had to move him back, and twice he came around that counter. Now, she handled herself well, and everything was fine, and thankfully there was no issue, but it made me concerned leaving her down there by herself when Jonathan's not around. So Jonathan asked me to come up with an idea, and I met with Tom Delaney, and we met with our maintenance guy that we use for projects, who did a lot of work for us at the country club, and is also doing some handicap improvements here at the town hall right now. We asked him, what do you think we could do? And what we came up with is, and I think I sent the sketch, did we put the sketch in the packet?
Yeah.
Is it in the packet? Did I put it in the
Yes.
packet? I know I sent it to you.
Yes, it
Came by
was.
email.
Okay, it came by email. I'm sorry I didn't put it in the packet, but basically
No,
what we
I
would
think
do
it may
is,
be in there as
you
well.
would keep the door locked at all times, and we would put a counter with a pull-down screen or a window in the center there, inlet, so that there is handicap accessibility to go under the counter, because you need to have that when a handicapped individual comes to the counter. And that way, that door is locked at all times, and it still allows the employee to service the public when they come in. And I think this makes a lot of sense. The estimate for this costs around $3,000 to $4,000 to do it. I know the assessors met last Friday and voted, what, 2-0?
Unanimous.
Unanimous of those voting and present, unanimous to support this particular proposal. So I'm bringing it to the select board tonight for approval, because I really think it's something that we need to do. That will leave only the town clerk's office as the office where anybody can walk in and have direct access to get behind the desk or into the office. All other offices really don't get a lot of public concern, and we're pretty secure in the rest of the offices. So this, to me, is a very important thing, and I would like to do that. Jonathan, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to it, or Dawn, but this is our proposal to the board.
Yeah, well, it's just, Mark had mentioned safety issues, but it's also trying to prevent identity theft, because we work with seniors, and in order to get exemptions, they have to bring in tax returns. There's a lot of sensitive information on that, and right now, people can just walk into the office and, you know, if we're in the process of doing something, they might be able to grab some information. So it's something that when I took over as the principal assessor, the first thing I did was change there was an arena had an office, and we don't have an office, we have a conference room, so now the board can meet within the office. And I think it's very functional. What we also did is try to get rid of a lot of paper, so we freed up some space. The counters that are there currently, if you see, those would be ripped up and taken away. And really those were put in to kind of house the, where all our paper files were. And we've actually gotten rid of 4 file cabinets full of paper, because we're trying to go to more of a paperless, we can do more things paperless than, so we're trying to make, it would serve a few purposes. I think it would make the assessor's office safer, it would protect seniors, vets, and other issues, personal and confidential information would protect that. And also, I think it would make the assessor's office more functional, so. And it seemed like the right time to do it because of this incident.
Questions, concerns? Yeah, John?
I just had 2 things. One, I asked Mark to take a look at the treasurer's office, because they do have that place in front, but the door into their work area is frequently open as I go through the building, and I see people going down there to talk to them and so forth. And I think it would be very easy to put a similar little gate there. And the other item I want to make is I've seen signs hanging on people's door as I go through the town hall saying, employees only. We need to be a little more tactful than just that. And maybe use some words like employees only unless invited by an employee, or no entry unless invited by an employee, or something along those lines. So.
And I agree with that. We don't want people to think they can't come into the assessor's office. Obviously, sometimes we have to have tough conversations with people, so we want to invite them in, and we bring them into the conference room to have the tough conversation. So we're, yeah, I would agree.
So you guys can come up with a good message that doesn't sound like boom.
Yeah, right.
Public invited with permission.
Yeah, the thing is, we put those up because of what was
Yeah, I
happening.
understand that, but now we're addressing it, so
Okay.
let's get that part too.
Gotcha.
So I have no aversion to what you propose, with one caveat. If you're going to have the configuration that you propose, how do you propose to have your assessors meetings open to the public?
When those meetings are open,
We just open the door.
you have to open the door and invite the public in at that point.
Yeah.
Just want you to realize that.
But that is times when you know the public is coming in and you prepare for it. It's the times when that person is in that office by themselves that I'm concerned about. You raise a very good point.
Okay, that's all.
You comfortable with that?
So I spent some time with Jonathan. I'm a little bit confused because you do have a lockable.
Is that because you spent time with Jonathan?
No. Jonathan was very pleasant and helpful to me.
I know, I was making a joke.
But you do have the ability to keep people out. You have that little gate between the 2 counters.
Yes, but we want to get rid of that.
But why does that not do what you want it to do, of keeping people from invading the desks and looking over people's shoulders?
Well, it's 2 feet from my desk, so it doesn't, people get really close to my desk. It's literally 2 feet. My desk is right there. I mean, you get to that, it's just one of those little,
Doesn't even have a lock. Just push it
no,
open.
it's just, yeah, you can push it open. I want to get rid of that, the counter there, the low counter, because all that does is hide file cabinets.
So
And
where are the file cabinets going to go after we do this?
they're going to go away.
I mean, you're going to eliminate all those
Yeah, I've eliminated 4 file cabinets and probably gonna eliminate another 2 or 3. When I get the time, it's based on the time of year that I can go through stuff and get rid of it, yeah. We had stuff from, I hate paper, so we had stuff that had dates of 1968 on it. I mean, it's stuff that we don't need. I just need to have the ability. There's only 2 of us, so I need to have the ability to go through it. We have been doing that. Megan's been doing that, myself, and so we've rid ourselves of 4 giant cabinets. And we also went to the 3rd floor today, and all our deeds are attached to our database now, and we have all these paper deeds, so we're gonna have to shred those. So that's gonna free up space from a couple of those cabinets we're gonna keep because it's archive material. We can take that we never use and we can put it upstairs.
I see. So I guess I've struggled with this because I'm a little bit, obviously we need to recognize safety concerns for our employees, but I think we need to balance access for the taxpayers. And the prospect of this little kind of indented thing in the hall as being the place where people have to stand to talk with you, it seems
I'm
not as welcoming, and it's, I'm just a little uncomfortable with some of this.
I myself wouldn't call it small because it's 3 feet in and 4 feet across, so that's not small to me.
But some of that 3 feet depth is going to be eaten up by a counter, so it's 2.5 feet, maybe 2 feet of standing room.
Well, I mean, we could make it deeper if that, we could make it deeper if you think it needs to be.
Well, I mean, I think it's something to think about. The change is from, according to the sketch, as it is now, you come through that door and there's an area that's essentially 9 feet by 5 feet for people to stand in. And they shouldn't go beyond that. I totally agree with that. But they also are not blocked by a window. I mean, there's people. We're a community. We're paying our taxes to support this building and these employees. It just feels a little bit more comfortable, I think. And to go to a space that is 2.5 or 3 feet even deep and 4 feet wide, and is essentially part of the hall where anybody walking by is going to overhear what you're talking about, then if there's privacy concerns, which I would assume there are often for taxpayers who are coming in to talk with assessors, that I'm not sure that's the right balance.
Yeah,
I guess
if
I'm
they
saying.
if they talk about what's private is personal property, what's private is excise tax, what's private is abatements, what's private is exemptions. But if someone wants to talk about their tax bill, I can go and pull your tax bill. Don can go and pull John's tax bill. That's public information. So if someone wants to, I think that this solution actually makes the assessor's office more functional, because if there's only 2 of us and one of us is away and we can't not go out to the field. When we're called to go to the field, we have to go to the field. So that makes the office closed, okay? It can't be open. With this 4 foot by 3 foot bump in, we're gonna be able to line both sides with veterans, exemption paperwork, all paperwork that is currently in the office, because there's no place to put it. Just can't hang it in the hallway. So this is gonna actually make it more functional for the folks that come in and wanna talk to us. And also, if they wanna come in and talk, and they can always look in, it's gonna be a giant window, and they can say, can we have a conversation? And if I'm the one who really knows what's private and what's not, they may not, and I'll say, ma'am or sir, you have to come into the office to talk to us. So
So
we're
when you
all
say
about
you're gonna-
customer service.
You say that you can't hang things in the hall, you're gonna hang them on the indented
On
place?
the indentation, yeah, I had brought up putting some things in the hallway, and it didn't really go over well, because it's a smaller hallway. It looks kind of ratty when they're hanging by the doors, but when you have an indentation and you can put them this way instead of this way, I think it just serves the public better.
I guess I'm still a little bit uneasy about it. It feels cramped to me, and it feels like, I'm not sure
Well, I mean,
that's-
if you'd like to make if you'd like to say it needs to be 5 feet or 4 feet in, or, I mean, you know, I just think that what I looked at, 4 feet by 3 feet seemed to work.
Typically, how long does a person stand at the counter?
Minutes.
Or how long, right?
Minutes, 2 minutes.
And if it's longer than that, and you'd anticipate inviting them,
Well, right now,
Into the
if there's, both of us are in the office and there needs to be a tough conversation, we take them and put them in the conference room. That's what we have the conference room for, and we can shut the door and have the conversation. So when someone comes in for an excise abatement, it's done right there. We take the abatement, we go to our computer, we do the abatement, and we give it back to them. So the only time it's ever crowded is when the first excise bills go out in the end of February. You have a bunch of abatements. But typically, it's a minute or two for each person. I've been here 7 years. I've never seen more than 3 people in line for an abatement.
I'll make a motion that we approve the request to change the layout of the assessor's office as presented.
Second?
Any other questions or discussion?
I do want to point out I'm supportive of where we're going, but you could get some cardboard, and you could make a cardboard mock-up of where you're going to put this thing.
So you can come by and look at it.
And you can get a feel for, is it going to be too tight or not? That's the nice part of it not being too big.
Yeah.
And you may want to make it, a foot larger or
Yeah,
or
that's
do
a great
something.
idea.
But that's
Well,
an
about
easy
5
way to,
Are you imagining a window that's going to be openable, or is it gonna,
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a sliding window, yes.
where's it gonna slide to?
It's
Like
a double, it's like a casement window. It slides open and slides shut so you can lock it
Yeah,
up at
but,
night.
so if you've got 4 feet of width, you can only have 2 feet open.
That's 2 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
We'll make sure. I'm thinking 5 feet right
If it
now.
has to be 5 feet, you just make it 5 feet.
Yeah, you just make it
It's-
5
It's
feet.
more effect.
that's
Right.
that's what the cardboard would let you.
Yeah.
would let
We'll
you
do it
check
on the
out.
wall.
Wait a minute, aren't you painting those walls as part of the renovations?
Not that section.
No, okay.
I don't think they're going down that far.
Okay, then, so much for punching a hole through.
We have a motion on the table. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I thank the board for.
I'm opposed.
When it's
4 to 1.
4 to 1.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
guys.
Don. Appreciate you guys being here tonight. To the ongoing issues list, if I may.
Yep.
Let's get this back up on the screen.
Before we leave the town hall
Yes.
repairs and renovations, may I ask another question?
Please.
I actually have 2 comments. So I visited the trailers before I came into the meeting, or I visited the trailer that Patricia was working in.
Oh, we were already in here, so we locked ours?
Yeah, or at least the one door I tried. I think we need some signs so people have some idea. I mean, there's a total of 4 doors out there with no indication of who's where.
Yeah, we
So-
probably should. That's an excellent suggestion. Dawn wanted this to be anonymous, but I guess we should, I'm joking. We should do that, Becky. That's a good suggestion.
And also, in the repair work that's being done, has our insurance company suggested, or should we consider having some sort of a water sensor? I understand that.
I'm taking the water bubblers out and not having them anymore.
Right, but we still got bathrooms, we still got water. I mean,
Oh,
aren't there ways that you can have some kind of something that'll alert
There's a
you?
flow meter alarm, so basically, and you can ask Tom Orcott about that, obviously, where the main water feed is into the building. If there's a flow running, there's an alarm sensor you can hook up to that. Might not be a bad
Okay.
move.
If the
I'll talk to
flow,
him.
if the flow runs
idea.
Longer than, say, a minute or
certain
whatever, yeah.
Well, you
Right.
do it
Yep.
half hour or something.
Okay.
Thank
That's a
you.
good suggestion, thank you, Becky. Updating some of the ongoing issues that we're dealing with. Senior Center Building Project, I had the opportunity to finally get Josh down there on Friday. I think Josh was impressed with the progress.
I was super impressed,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
What a great space in there.
It's gonna be nice.
Bright, lit, awesome, open.
Yeah.
It's gonna not just serve the seniors, but it's gonna serve the community. So it's
Yeah,
really,
It is.
really,
It's gonna
it's
be
great.
gorgeous.
So we're still on target for an October 22nd completion date. We're meeting with the contractor regularly, so that project is moving along nicely. With regards to the Prescott School Sprinkler System project, Josh and I and Bud, along with Mary and Bruce, we had our first Prescott oversight meeting last Friday. It was a great meeting. We will be bringing the financials to the board at your August 26th meeting, because we want Josh to be present for that. And I don't think you're gonna be at the next meeting, correct?
No.
Okay.
Will not be at the
So
next meeting.
we'll bring that to the board, but we asked Bruce for an update on where he was with the sprinkler system. He's in the process of getting the design done and getting ready to go out to bid. One of the things I suggested to them is that they put a placeholder on the fall town meeting warrant should the bids come in higher than the money that's allocated. So if they need to go back to the CPC and town meeting, they'll have that availability, because if they don't do it in October, they throw everything out and they have to wait until next spring. So I know Bruce is planning on getting on the agenda of the next CPC meeting to ask for an out-of-cycle application so that we can put that on the warrant. But we'll have more details when the Prescott Committee, when we come in and give you an update on August 26th. But that, I would say overall, Josh, I thought the meeting went well.
Yeah, I thought we covered a lot of ground in the amount of time we spent.
The Green Communities application, I have to tell you, I've been having a lot of fun with this one. Trying to do the energy audit has been very, very difficult, but Kelly Brown came through big time. I have an engineer lined up to do the energy audit, and we are well on our way for the October application. So things are progressing nicely on that. I want to thank Kelly Brown. I hope to cross that off soon. I could cross the next thing off the, or you want to wait until you make the actual appointments?
Yeah.
Wait till you make the appointments,
Take
okay.
the charter off the list?
No,
No, I'm talking
the
about the
major
initiative,
Oh,
major
okay.
initiative planning.
No, because we.
Wait until we make the appointments, I
Well,
agree.
wait till we at least hear back
Yep.
from FinCom and all.
Charter, it's still in the House, I expect to hear the approval any day now.
He says.
Florence Roach, elementary school feasibility study update. Really good news on that. They advertised the RFS for the designer services, and in the first day that it was advertised, 30 firms took out specs.
Really?
Well, the first week anyway. Was that, did you get that email, Allison? Maybe I got that from.
May have, but I
Yeah,
don't-
30
doesn't ring a
firms
bell,
took
so
out
it's-
specs. They're having a mandatory walkthrough either tomorrow or Wednesday, I can't remember the date. Wednesday, that they're coming in, I had my calendar, I had it on Tuesday, but it's actually Wednesday. They're coming in at 10 o'clock on Wednesday for the mandatory walkthrough with the designer, so that's moving nicely. Highway, library and highway are moving forward, and I have no update on anything else. So unless the board has any questions?
I have an update, please, on K.
Yep.
So this is something that I had asked for some time ago, and I think I had also volunteered to do some work on. So now I'm really going to hold myself to doing some work, and I will try to have something ready for either the next meeting or the one after that. But as part of that, Mark, could you provide me just a written summary of how we have done this
How we do it
before?
now? Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just ask Becky, if you're gonna write that, remember we talked about a while ago for major votes of this board, and I don't know how to define what a major vote of this board is, but for something really important requires a full board to be present. Or available by remote participation, if
Okay.
applicable.
Okay.
Please incorporate that in if you would.
John?
Save me the time.
I just have two things. We got a response back from Senator Kennedy's office relative to complete streets. And some of the ball dropped on our end.
I don't think so.
Well, at any rate, it says that now it's open.
Yes.
And have we notified the
Oh,
Complete Streets people?
as soon as
So-
I got Senator Kennedy's
Okay.
email, an email went out to George and Michelle that said, start your application. And I received a response back, we're on it.
And then we got a letter back from Senator Kennedy relative to the letter we had sent him regarding Pepperell and the toxic site.
Correct. And he's working, he's
And
supporting
he's
the
right
board's
on top
position.
of that, so.
I will tell you, Senator Kennedy's office has been extremely responsive to the
Right.
town of
I'm
Groton.
impressed.
I've noticed
I am
that
very
too.
impressed. And by the way, the Senate today passed the Article 97 on Olivia Way and moved it off to the House.
Oh, really?
I got that in
nice.
today.
Nice.
So Senator Kennedy's office is amazing. And it- from a constituent viewpoint. That's all I have, Allison.
Sorry, I meant to mention this under other business. I'd like to have on the next agenda a discussion of the Select Board at Town of Groton email address.
And,
She did that when she was sitting here.
and then.
We talked about this once
this
before, it has some
exemption
problems,
says
and
plastic bags typically allowed here.
I'd just like us to explore whether there's some better alternatives.
Blah, 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 blah,
All right.
and are
We'll put
not
that on.
prohibited under this.
Other point.
Anything else? We have one set of minutes
I
from
move
July
that-
15th.
I move that we approve the minutes of July 15th, 2019 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Don't forget, every Friday, there's a farmer's market from 3 p.m. until 7 p.m., and it's filled with great foods, candies, produce, and music. It's at the Williams Barn on Chicopee Road. Please attend.
Very good. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.